work of the Free Trade Commission of the NAFTA so as to continue to work towards achieving these objectives. Today, we've seen that prosperity in the region depends on a greater integration with full respect of our sovereignties in all fields. And in this context, I'd like to reiterate the interest of my country to join forces as soon as possible to the TPP, or the Trans-Pacific Partnership, and its negotiations, because we know that Mexicans can contribute to a quick and successful conclusion of this project. If we join forces in this region, where we see the greatest growth in the world, we will be generating benefits for our families, our workers, and also substantially improving the competitiveness of the three countries in this context. We are convinced that the experience and participation of Mexico will enrich this free trade project of the latest generation that encompasses countries in Asia, Oceania, and America. Our country has a clear commitment to economic freedom. We even have the support of the private sector so as to enter into the TPP. We are a nation that believes in free trade as a true tool to foster growth and development, and we have acted as a result of this. I would also like to thank the United States and Canada for renewing their support to Mexico and its presidency of G20. As you know, in June of this year, Mexico will host the summit of the leaders of the G20 in Los Cabos. We are convinced, over and above the topics that we will be dealing with there, that the complex international environment needs to be an opportunity so that the world can redefine its development models with a firm commitment to the well-being of peoples and the care for the environment. Ladies and gentlemen, in this summit, the representatives of the United States, Canada, and Mexico have undertaken an open, constructive dialogue, just as corresponds to countries that share values. We've talked about the enormous challenges facing us so as to work together in the globalized world, and as a result, we will be working on building a new era that consolidates the right conditions for development in North America on the basis of a successful partnership, as we have seen so far today. My dear President Obama, thank you for your hospitality.
Mr. Harper.
Well, first of all, I'd like to begin by thanking you, Barack, for so graciously and so warmly, literally, hosting us here today. And I'd also like to begin by offering my sincere condolences to you, Felipe, and through you to the people of Mexico on the passing of former President Miguel de la Madrid, who I gather had much to do with the NAFTA partnership that we enjoy today. J'aimerais également remercier le président Obama et le président Calderon pour une discussion fructueuse et utile. Canada places the highest value on the friendship and partnership among our three countries. We form one of the world's largest free trade zones, which has been of great benefit to all of our nations. We're also effective collaborators in the G20 in responding to the challenges of the global recession and instability of these past few years. Comme nous l'avons affirmé la semaine dernière dans notre budget, notre gouvernement se concentre sur la création d'emplois, la croissance économique et la prospérité à long terme pour tous les Canadiens et Canadiennes. As affirmed in our budget last week, our government is focused on creating jobs, growth, and long-term prosperity for all Canadians. Le sommet d'aujourd'hui a été une excellente occasion de discuter de la manière dont on doit, en tant que partenaire nord-américain, continuer de travailler ensemble en vue d'assurer la prospérité de la population de nos trois pays. I'm especially pleased that the United States has welcomed Canada's and Mexico's interest in joining the Trans-Pacific Partnership. We also had useful discussions on continued cooperation in managing our borders, streamlining regulations, securing global supply chains, and advancing clean energy. In addition, we've announced a broadened plan for North American pandemic preparedness and a new North America, Central America dialogue on security to fight transnational organized crime. Finally, we discussed the agenda for the upcoming Summit of the Americas in Colombia. Canada looks forward to continue to working with the United States and Mexico to promote democratic principles, regional stability, and market-based economic growth with our partners in the Western Hemisphere. And once again, Barack and Felipe, I look forward to continuing our useful discussions in Cartagena.
Outstanding. All right, I think that we're going to take a question from each press delegation. So start with Juliana.
Thank you, Mr. President. After last week's arguments at the Supreme Court, many experts believe that there could be a majority, a 5-member majority, to strike down the individual mandate. And if that were to happen, if it were to be ruled unconstitutional, how would you still guarantee health care to the uninsured and those Americans who've become insured as a result of the law? And then a question for President Calderon and Prime Minister Harper. Over the weekend, Governor Mitt Romney said that the U.S. used to promote free enterprise around the world. And he said, quote, "Our president doesn't have the same feelings about American exceptionalism that we do." And I think over the last 3 or 4 years, some people around the world have begun to question that. So my question to the both of you is whether you think that American influence has declined over the last 3 to 4 years. And President Obama, if you'd like to respond to that too.
Well, on the second part of your question, it's still primary season for the Republican Party. They're going to make a decision about who their candidate will be. It's worth noting that I first arrived on the national stage with a speech at the Democratic Convention that was entirely about American exceptionalism, and that my entire career has been a testimony to American exceptionalism. But I will cut folks some slack for now because they're still trying to get their nomination. With respect to health care, I'm actually continue to be confident that the Supreme Court will uphold the law. And the reason is because in accordance with precedent out there, it's constitutional. That's not just my opinion, by the way. That's the opinion of legal experts across the ideological spectrum, including 2 very conservative appellate court justices that said this wasn't even a close case. I think it's important, because I watched some of the commentary last week, to remind people that this is not an abstract argument. People's lives are affected by the lack of availability of health care, the inaffordability of health care, their inability to get health care because of pre-existing conditions. The law that's already in place has already given 2.5 million young people health care that wouldn't otherwise have it. There are tens of thousands of adults with pre-existing conditions who have health care right now because of this law. Parents don't have to worry about their children not being able to get health care because they can't be prevented from getting health care as a consequence of a pre-existing condition. That's part of this law. Millions of seniors are paying less for prescription drugs because of this law. Americans all across the country have greater rights and protections with respect to their insurance companies and are getting preventive care because of this law. So that's just the part that's already been implemented. That doesn't even speak to the 30 million people who stand to gain coverage once it's fully implemented in 2014. And I think it's important. I think the American people understand, and I think the justices should understand that in the absence of an individual mandate, you cannot have a mechanism to ensure that people with pre-existing conditions can actually get health care. So there's not only an economic element to this and a legal element to this, but there's a human element to this. And I hope that's not forgotten in this political debate. Ultimately, I'm confident that the Supreme Court will not take what would be an unprecedented, extraordinary step of overturning a law that was passed by a strong majority of a democratically elected Congress. And I just remind conservative commentators that for years what we've heard is the biggest problem on the bench was judicial activism or a lack of judicial restraint, that an unelected group of people would somehow overturn a duly constituted and passed law. Well, there's a good example, and I'm pretty confident that this court will recognize that and not take that step. I'm sorry. You know, as I said, we are confident that this will be that this will be upheld. I'm confident that this will be upheld because it should be upheld. And again, that's not just my opinion. That's the opinion of a whole lot of constitutional law professors and academics and judges and lawyers who've examined this law, even if they're not particularly sympathetic to this particular piece of legislation or my presidency.
Bueno, es demasiado local su pregunta y será respetuoso del proceso interno de Estados Unidos, pero
a little local for me, and so I'm glad that the President of the United States answered it. But I would take advantage of this moment to say that after increasing the budget line for the folk insurance sixfold, and after having built more than 1,000 new clinics in the country, we're getting close to reaching universal coverage of health care. Full, free health care coverage for all people up to 18 years of age, including cancer coverage of the 12 million Mexicans. 106 million will have efficient, effective, universal health care coverage. So I would say that that I would hope that one of the greatest economies in the world, such as the United States, could follow our example in achieving this, because it was a great thing.
I don't think you really expect me to intervene in the U.S. presidential election. Let me just say this, you know, for Canada, and this is something that I think transcends governments in Canada or administrations here in the United States. For Canada, the United States is and always will be our closest neighbor, our greatest ally, and our best friend. And I believe that American leadership is at all times great and indispensable for the world. And I think over the past few years, we've done great things together in terms of the response, both through the G20 and bilaterally on the recession and the recovery. We had, under your leadership, Barack, that successful intervention in Libya. Our trade relationship is the biggest in the world and growing, and so I think it's been a tremendous partnership.
Somebody from the Mexican press corps.
Hola, muy buenas tardes. Para el presidente Felipe Calderon.
Good afternoon. For President Calderon, you were saying, you were referring to weapons. We'd like to know what President Obama said in terms of what's going to be done to stop the traffic of weapons. And President Obama, I'd like to know what plans your government has in the presidential election process in Mexico. What was discussed in terms of the interviews with the candidates in Mexico City? And I'd also like to know, for the government of the United States, whether there's a threat for the country in this sense on weapons. Mr. President, the weapons have come into the country. Are there military leaks of letting the arms come through? What's going to be done? And for Prime Minister Harper, is the visa requirement going to be removed for Mexicans? Thank you.
That's a lot of questions. Go ahead, go first.
Bueno, ha sido muy clara mi posición sobre este tema.
My position on this subject is very clear, and I would repeat it here. Let me broach it from another angle. It's been shown that when there is an excessive, quick availability of weapons in any given society, there is an increase in violence and the murders that goes on many years afterwards. This phenomenon took place in many places of Africa after their civil wars. We've seen it in El Salvador, Guatemala, in Eastern Europe, in Kosovo, in Bosnia.